So again, welcome everybody to Code Camp. Is everybody having a good time?
Yeah.
Well, my name is Stacey Broadwell, and I'd like to welcome you to our Leaders in Technology panel. And before I have our leaders introduce themselves, I'll introduce myself. I am the CEO of IT Talent Search. We're a staffing agency in Los Angeles, California for technology professionals. And my co-moderators, Daniel Egan, which many of you know, allow him to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Daniel Egan. I'm a fellow Evangelist in Southern California. For those of you that do not know what I do or what it is, I'll give you the short answer. I'm here to make developers happy, so whatever you need, tools, presentations, helping with code, whatever, that's what we do, so just let me know.
Hi everybody, I'm Alex Tatians from Zynx Health. I'm a Director of Software Development, and just a couple words about Zynx. We're a clinical decision support company, so we provide content, healthcare content for hospitals, for clinicians to use at the point of care. Over 1,700 hospitals in the United States use our software and our content. Glad to be here.
Okay. I'm Chet Burgess, Senior Systems Architect for LiveNation Entertainment. Specifically, I work in the ticketing division, a company called TicketMaster. I'm sure a lot of folks have heard of us. LiveNation Entertainment is a huge live entertainment company, basically. So anything from sports to theaters to music, concerts, that sort of stuff. And then, like I said, the division I work for is TicketMaster. We primarily focus on the ticketing side, so the actual everything from pre-sales, fan club pre-sales, to the actual day of sales, box office sales, up to and including, when you walk in the door, your ticket gets scanned by a little barcode reader, and the technology behind that and validating the ticket at the door. So and specifically, I said I'm a senior systems architect, so I work with our operations folks, our developers, our product folks, in helping to design and deliver our products and platforms to our clients and customers.
Hi, I'm Mike Strange. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for GreenDot Corporation. So we produce reloadable prepaid Visa cards, looks like that, which is a financial services vehicle that you can buy in any retail operation, Walmart, Walgreens, et cetera, and it's a reloadable card, so you can use it essentially like a bank account. That's the product. I've actually got 2 of them to give away that are worth $20 each for the best questions. So you get to actually see the product. But basically, the company is a transaction processing organization, so we're responsible for all the systems that enable the features for all of our card holders, as well as all the processing every time you use the card, et cetera. So that's the operation that we run, and I run the software development function for the company.
Hi, I'm Nancy Lehrer, and I'm the Director of Enterprise Architecture at Amgen. Amgen makes human therapeutics, also known as a biotech company. It's a, let's see, I have to read from the sheet here. It's $14.6 billion in revenue company. It's one of the largest biotechs in the world, worldwide organization. It's located in Thousand Oaks, California, which is kind of Ventura County, just up the road.
Hi, I'm Cameron Izakana. I'm VP of Engineering at ReachLocal. ReachLocal is a company we just went public about 6 months ago. Our work basically helps small businesses take advantage or get involved with the web, advertising, search engine marketing, etc. I'm the VP of Engineering, do all of the work, starting from product conception to out the door, and then after that probably also.
So yeah, my name is Kobe Rehnquist. I am, as of a week from this coming Monday, VP of Engineering at G5 Search Marketing. As of yesterday, I was Executive Director of Application Services at AT&T Interactive. Both companies are open source shops, or fairly open source shops. So I've got, let's see, nobody else from Interactive made it. So that's kind of my background. I'm an open source guy. I spent the first 16 years of my career developing on Microsoft, and then I found Ruby and switched. I now manage teams of developers, and basically I get paid to build out teams of good people who can solve problems and add value to the companies that I work for.
One of the biggest things that in my opinion, in the whole IT industry holds us back and really fails to unleash our potential is clarity. So one of the things that you all can bring to your role is your ability to explain yourself, to explain the system that you're building, to explain what it's for, and the boundaries that you put around it so that you can control projects and control scope, regardless of which technology you happen to bring. So that's one of the skills that I'm looking for in a leader as you progress from an individual contributor into a leadership role.
The level of expertise and the importance of the technology changes. I mean, where my company or our company is today, we change our minds about 5 minutes, every 5 times every minute. I mean, we are discussing a product and it's changing as we've been discussing. And as was mentioned earlier, the communication skills are key. I don't think we have found anything that has been dramatic because somebody wrote a bad line of code or 2 or 3, but definitely we found things that are dramatically wrong because somebody misunderstood what somebody else was saying. So again, where you fall in that spectrum or where you're planning to be or where your career is, I think has a big impact on where you go.
So we do much less actual building of individual and writing individual lines of code, so much more gluing different things together. And it's really a matter of being able to troubleshoot very quickly, being able to have a lot of different kinds of ways that you solve the problem in your tool chest. So I always write web services. Well, what about RSS? Well, what about just old HTTP post? Well, what about just old SQL batch? Because we got this legacy system over here that can only talk about that. So it's being able to have, everybody's always asking me, can't your group just write down the list of rules to architect the next system? And I'm like, well, unfortunately, if I could do that, that'd be great, but we can't because it's like there's this whole pile of experience. So it's gaining experience using different kinds of tools, different kinds of patterns, and understanding how to use them in the best way, when to combine them. It's not just the one or the other sort of approach.
A key skill set, scale, if I can use just one word to describe it. And that goes both ways. Sometimes people talk about, oh, well, your software's good, but it doesn't scale to Google size, Amazon size, Facebook size. And few people do. There's a reason there's only a few companies at that scale. But there's also the other side of it. I've seen developers and development teams write these incredibly complex systems to do incredibly simple and trivial tasks. And sometimes it's also about, you have to understand where in kind of the scale continuum what you're doing is going to fit and develop the most appropriate solution. As an architect, it's very hard for me to go to our operations staff and say, well, you're going to have to spin up 100 VMs and allocate X number of resources for this really trivial task if I know it can be done with like 2 or 3 small VMs. It's like, well, we over-architected the solution, we over-designed, we overwrote it. So be sure you understand where in the scale continuum what you're doing fits.
I think sometimes software engineers make not the mistake, but they focus a lot on specific technologies and kind of ignore the other stuff, which is kind of the best practices around our industry. So, design patterns are not a technology, right? Unit testing is not a technology. Test-driven development is not a technology. Mock objects are not a technology. They're best practices. They're ideas that a lot of smart people have come up with to make our business easier. So it's important to know WCF, and it's important to know the latest version of Silverlight and all the latest and greatest technologies, but it's also important to keep up with what are the best practices that make you a better software developer.
If I know that you know 13 different languages, I am actually going to be reluctant to hire you for a position that does only one thing. I'm going to be more inclined to bring you into a position where you can work on a team that actually has some exposure to different things. It's a difference from bringing somebody in to work on a simple web service that's clearly defined and the tool set has already been made, and bringing somebody into a core engineering team or an engineering team that's a little bit deeper in the company that actually makes the decisions about how are we going to go about solving an analytics problem to keep track of everything that customers do on the site. What tools do we want to use? In that case, I'm hiring people who have a breadth of skill as well as a depth, but I also hire people out of college with just a little bit of background. I hire people from user groups and from experience based on what they have in their open source portfolio, depending on the job. So, I would say it definitely varies by the position I'm hiring for.
Ultimately, at least from our perspective, when we look for a software engineer, we're looking for 2 things first and foremost, which is attitude and aptitude. As far as attitude, we really do believe that software development for a large part is a team sport. So you've got to be able to collaborate. You've got to be able to achieve consensus. You've got to be able to work together with someone on a problem, because it's, lone wolf kind of development these days is just tough to do on a large scale. So from that perspective, you've got to be, you have to have, kind of persistence and high motivation. You've got to kind of come to work being passionate about what you do. So that's kind of the attitude side. The aptitude side, I mean, the truth of the matter is, there are some specific skills that make a good software engineer. Being able to think abstractly is key. Being able to have attention to detail. Being able to focus. And if you don't have kind of that combination of just skills and abilities first and foremost, it's sometimes difficult to become a really great software engineer.
All too often, when we're trying to hire tech people, we're focusing on the technical skill sets part of the interview, which is an important part. I mean, we do need to know that the person we're hiring can do what we need them to do, but we have a tendency to dominate our interview and our hiring practices with that, and we don't spend enough time talking about, do you understand the design practices, and also things like evaluating the person and how they'll fit in the company's culture. I've been places where absolutely brilliant people get hired, but they just do not fit well with the company. They could do anything the company wants, but the cultures, they just don't match. And so I think that's something, if I could give a piece of advice to any hiring managers out there, or anyone who becomes a hiring manager, think about that as well. Think beyond just what do you need from a purely technical skill set and check the boxes, off the resume. Also think about the kind of the softer skill set side, if you will, of things.
I hire first for passion. And then the other piece is, if they're not passionate about what they're doing, I really don't care how good they are at it. So first for passion with what we're trying to accomplish, and passionate about what they're doing as a skill. Do you care about being a good computer programmer? Do you care about being a good systems architect? Do you care about a good data structure? And then the other piece of it is, for somebody to be hired onto one of my teams, somebody on the team not only all have to agree that we want to hire the person, but somebody has to agree to sponsor them. So one of the ways we avoid the brilliant guy who doesn't get along with anybody else is somebody on on the team that he's interviewing to join, he or she is interviewing to join. Somebody on that team must say, I will take this person under their wing. I'm excited to have them on this team. So I will take the burden of bringing them in and helping mentor them into the role of the team.
What I often look for is the artistic side, because what we do, in my opinion, is a combination of art and science, right? And so if you think of yourself as a manufacturing engineer, and if you train for a very narrow set of skill sets, and you're constantly learning, language heuristics and all that kind of thing, optimizing code, and what you're doing is you're pushing yourself more and more to be a manufacturing engineer. And what I really look for is the artistic side. So when I ask, hiring questions, it's not so much about, can you write me a line, set of code, do you know all of that by heart? It's, tell me about granularity, right? Regardless of what language you've chosen, and how do you make those trade-off decisions? Because those things are going to be true regardless of what language you're using.
So Erlang is a programming language designed for concurrency. So it solves, it's one of those where, we say, well, all the tools are the same, syntax is different. Actually, in Erlang, some of the composition and how you solve problems is different. The entire approach is quite a bit different. So I would say the difference between something like C#, Ruby, Haskell, and Erlang, Haskell being a functional language, Erlang being a highly concurrent language, Ruby being dynamic, and C#, well, C# being a mix between dynamic and static, depending on what you're using. So the question is, what's coming out that's making a difference? I think Erlang is going to make a major difference because we have huge amounts of processes that we have to get done. We've basically exceeded or reached some of the limits of our physical material and building processors.
I'm actually fascinated by the sheer size that we're beginning to see in some of the systems that are out there, and the amount of data they're handling, things like Facebook and Google, where you're talking about 500 million users' data and their posts, their statuses, their chats, all that sort of stuff on Facebook. It requires some interesting new ways of thinking in order to achieve things at that scale. And so I'm fascinated by some of the things coming out of the Amazons and the Googles, and even Yahoo's as well, things like Hadoop, protocol buffers, these sort of things that I think are a little bit different. They're different than a lot of the traditional methods and things we've been doing and the way we've been doing stuff. Really taking some of the notions of concurrency and that sort of stuff and say, well, how do we really make that happen across all these environments and all these users and all these systems? And that's interesting to me because I think we're at a point where we kind of needed to evolve to the point where we could handle data sets that are that large. I don't know that 10 years ago we could have done data sets that are that large, both from physical, processors get faster, but also, we've had to start thinking about these design patterns and how we design at incredible scale, not just scale, but incredible scale. And some of the technologies coming out of that are pretty interesting to me, and I think it's going to be interesting to see the direction they go as they start feeding into this whole cloud computing and what really happens with cloud computing. So far cloud computing has just been this, we're going to install VMware, we're going to virtualize our physical hardware, which is great. It's been big cost savings for a lot of companies, but what's the next step? And I think some of the stuff coming out of Facebook and Google about the way we handle these incredibly large data sets and the way data flows is going to feed into that. It's going to be interesting to see as more of the it's in the cloud starts materializing and what that looks like.
The things that are important now in the enterprise level are good old-fashioned information integration. This is technologies that have been in the pipeline cooking for the last 20 years, right? That have now made it to real commercial products that an enterprise without star programmers, because quite frankly, Amgen doesn't have a lot of people I could point to and say, you're a star programmer, right? Can take and use and apply to the business. Mobile computing, and I don't mean people using their BlackBerry, I don't mean consumer mobile computing, I mean, how does a sales rep use a mobile device to increase sales or save on the cost of printing brochures and things like that, or get the latest technical or medical information to the person they're talking to. Virtualization is really important, as enterprises try to lower their cost of ownership, they're looking more and more at software as a service providers and infrastructure as a service providers. And with that comes identity management. So identity management federation, if you want to know the one thing that we have see a real lack in people who understand how to actually program and do, and that's the federated identity management and digital leakage protection. Those kinds of things are really important at the enterprise level.